Hey, and it actually worked. We're live this time. This is second time's the charm. Hi, my name is Joshua McGuire, and I am the host of Breaking Reality. Thank you for joining us tonight. With me tonight, we have Tiffany of Modern Mystic. She is going to be here as my co-host tonight. Thank you, Tiffany. And our guest tonight is Mary. Mary is a death doula, and Mary is going to be here tonight discussing grief, healing, and support. And we're going to get right into this discussion since we've taken so long trying to get this thing actually started.
Well, seeing as how we're talking about timing, it's never a convenient time to grieve. And I always like to jump in with that because sometimes there's something around the timing of it that we think could have been better, should have been a different way. And I just want to bring everybody into the space that you're here at the perfect time, and you're grieving exactly how you're supposed to grieve. And the fact that you're here and you're opening yourself up to sit in community tells me that you are holding it in the perfect way. So my name is Mary, and I'm an end-of-life doula, and I share about grief. Grief is, in my understanding of it now, working with end of life and being a student of my own grief, I can probably and properly say grief is a portal. It's not a portal that you want to jump in. It's not a portal that you willingly go through, but nonetheless, we're here and we're in it, and it has a way to transform us. It has a way of making us sit and be present and sit in silence, and it has a way of changing us at the end. Maybe the end's the wrong word. At the end of a cycle of grief, once we kind of can look back, we usually are a different person than how we started on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I truly believe is the medicine of our human experience. And I love to show people and support people in the grieving process, because it actually can be extremely empowering to be led by an end-of-life doula or a coach or a counselor or somebody you trust in this space. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to lead. And since grief can be so complicated, it could be the grief of a relationship, it could be grief of an identity with self, and then it can be all the way down to the grief and the loss of somebody. So it can come in at any place, and it could be multiple different griefs at one time. But the way I like to share grief is I invite people to kind of sit with whatever is at the aliveness of your grief, what is at the forefront, what has brought you here to us today. And I'm going to go through 5 different gates of grief and just see where you're at with that gate. So the first gate of grief is everything we love, we will lose. That's gate number 1. Everything that we love, we will lose. Gate number 2 is the places that we have not known love. Gate 3 is the sorrows of the world. Gate 4 is what we expected and did not receive. And 5 is ancestral grief.
Oh. I resonate with all of those. Like, I understand what you just said.
This is going to be an interesting conversation. So, I guess we start at the first gate.
Yeah, and like with these gates, I guess, is it like, do most people go through like the progression, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or do they kind of jump around?
It's all over the place. It's quantum.
I figured.
It's layered. It's sometimes extremely simple, and you can see exactly what gate you're in, and sometimes it's foggy, and gates are merging together into another gate. So definitely all of these gates can be open for people, and I like to explain it through the gates of grief because it really has a different way. There's the stages of grief that people in my leadership community and people in end of life talk about, the stages of grief, and why I find that they're valid. I like the gates of grief because it really just kind of invites you in to explore.
Right.
But it resonates differently.
It does.
Because like stages, it's like, oh, I haven't, like I'm already at this stage, but I'm in this stage
Well,
too. It's like,
and the thing, even in discussing the stages of grief, they're not linear either, and they can get all entangled and layered on top of each other, and you can have multiple stages all at once. But I like the idea of gates because gates give you the ability to step in. And Mary, I think this is about your tattoo, which I know what your tattoo is. If you want to explain it.
love
Yeah.
it.
It says butterfly to represent transition. Yeah. It was a practice in our ancestral days, in the Egyptian ancestral days. The moth was a great symbol for the throat, transformation of the voice, transformation of the life cycles, transformation of energy, and the throat itself. The placement of this means so much to me personally because it is the bridge between the heart and the mind.
Yes.
And for great transformation, those two have to meet in beautiful unison. And for me, it was a very personal liberation of voice when I chose to put it there as well. So
Now, is it the death head moth that you have?
It's a Luna moth.
Yeah.
It's a Luna moth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've had one land on me before and just hang out. And I was like, oh!
That's how I know you're chosen and you're special. They only land on people that are trusted.
That and animals and the empath in me, the healer, animals in me are just like this. So that, oh wow. And that's where I went down the rabbit hole of researching like the Luna moth and that makes so much sense. Like the being trusted or that's animal medicine at its best.
Yeah. Yes, at its best, when they are so vulnerable with us, and that butterfly knew that any moment you could kill it. It's been very mindful its whole life. That's how it got there. And so,
Exactly.
It's very beautiful to hear that. So good.
I love it so much. The symbolism.
Yeah, I really like that. We are actually, Melissa, we are not pulling cards tonight. This is actually a podcast. This is a discussion.
I'm messaging her.
Yeah. So.
Well, what did she say? I'm just curious.
She was asking if Tiffany could pull some cards for her.
Okay, because I can't see the chat, so I can't see.
Oh, you can't.
Oh, okay.
Are
she
you
said
on
she's
iPhone?
Yeah.
That's iPhones don't show the chat.
Yeah. So let me know.
Okay.
What I can respond to.
I'll pop them up. We'll pop them up on the screen.
Yeah, you saw how we put those up on the screen earlier. Whenever someone asks a question, we can put that up. That way you can see it.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Excellent.
And I'm sharing out.
So let's get into the whole aspect of these gates and diving more into these gates and how people can work with this aspect in their grief and through their grief process. Because I know there's a lot of people out there grieving, like you said, all kinds of different things. It's not just the loss of a loved one or, that sort of aspect. With everything that happened during COVID and that time frame, there was a whole loss of a way of life, a way of being. There was a loss of jobs. There was just a lot that happened that people are experiencing grief and they're not even realizing that it's grief that they're experiencing because they're not associating that loss with kind of a death.
And also a lot of awakenings happening where people are kind of going through their own, like I had a crazy spontaneous Kundalini years back. And then that thing flung me into straight up, like I've had 2 near-death experiences since then, full out of body. And the ego aspect of that with the dark night of the soul, that's a whole nother level of grief because it's like you're grieving your old life. You're grieving who you had been while you're bringing in this new aspect of who you are. And that's a whole kind of grief in itself. You kind of mentioned that some of it deals with ego as well.
Yeah, It has to. Grief, it does get tied into so easily. We can take grief really personal, and how could we not? Because we're feeling this, because it's happening, and we're experiencing the loss on a physical and spiritual and energetic level. But if you look at what grief is, it has to happen. And the more that we can get out of the way of it, and the more we can explore that void, like unknown space, and the more we can kind of trust it, what we're doing in grief, when we're wailing, when we're moving the body,
That's
when
it.
we're screaming, when we're hitting things, when we're numbed out, what's really happening is our nervous system is now regulating us to the new reality. You want to talk about breaking reality? Grief breaks the reality of what you knew your life to be before. So the nervous system expresses itself through grief. And the more that we can let it and not hold any resistance to it, the sooner that we can let our nervous system do what it needs to do, and we can now experience the world with that loss, yes, with that darkness, yes, with that sadness, yes, but we'll hold it so much more differently when we're not so thrown off by the things that are happening within our body. And Kundalini awakening is something that happens through grief. So Kundalini awakenings can happen when we're on the path of awakening, and it can happen in a really beautiful breath work cacao medicine experience, and those are delicious. Or on the flip side of that, because we live dualistic lives, and on the flip side of what the bliss is great loss and unknown and grief, and we can experience a Kundalini awakening within grief as well. And this is what I
ding ding ding
hold that space for clients, to help them realize enough of the layers to get that within grief. And I've seen it time and time again with the people I work with, and within myself. And the only reason why I knew this was possible was because I experienced a Kundalini awakening in the darkest time of my life.
Mine was similar, actually. I'm like, I gotta get your information and schedule with you, because mine was
at the bottom of the screen.
Oh, I got it. Because mine was at a dark time too, and it was like, but I was doing yoga. I was learning yoga to teach to my theater students. I was, more awakened. I just learned what empath was. I had learned, and then all of a sudden, when it hit me, it just flipped everything upside down, and my whole life changed.
And one of the things that can happen is when that Kundalini awakening happens during those dark times, instead of it being like that really blissful, enlightening, that really kind of energetic coming in, can actually pull you into a really bad depression.
It did after the original bliss.
Right. You can have a few moments of that, oh, hey, that's awesome. And then boom, into that deep, deep depression, that despair, that darkness.
That grief.
That's what they talk about, going through that dark night of the soul. Once you have that Kundalini awakening, you can have those dark night of the soul, which can be separate from a grieving instance, but can be encompassed within.
The grief comes up with it.
Right, which takes it to a whole different level of trying to understand what's going on energetically and working through it.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Also, how she was talking about the nervous system. I hadn't really thought about the grief aspect with the nervous system, but I know for me, it was like, I developed lupus, fibromyalgia after hysterectomy. I couldn't have kids. I was a teacher. I went into severe depression. I was grieving the loss of being able to be a mother. I was grieving. And that's when the Kundalini hit me. And that's my nervous system fritzed out. That's when the fibro hit, and it all happened at once. And I hadn't really tied it with grief, but that makes a lot of sense, because that was the main thread under it all, was grief.
Well, now that you just made that thread, which was a big thread,
yeah,
and so it is.
And so it is.
And that is the alchemizer, is our awareness to the map and the landscape of how things are tied together. And so once you can build that receptor, that knowing, you can't unknow what you just discovered for yourself.
No, I always thought grief was under anger, but it is in a lot of ways. But that I also had anger too. I was angry at everything for a while there, trying to understand. And that makes sense that it's the alchemizer, that it is the underlying transformation that forces us. Because I've been dragging my feet through an awakening for a long time. And finally it was like, all right, you got to do this. And it was just fire, like breathing through me, clear it all out. There's no hiding from it anymore.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I see this thing that just popped up from, I wish I could read this. Cameron.
It's Cannon Wilson. I can read them out. I can read them out to you when you're ready.
I have recently discovered I need glasses. I'm not to this eye doctor yet, but I do need glasses. Thank you for reading it for me.
Girl, Amazon, get some cheaters.
Okay.
It says, how do you address grieving the loss of innocence?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big question, and my in order to answer that for Canon, you said?
Canon.
Would be what part of innocence are we referring to?
I think they might mean childhood as well.
Yeah, is it childhood innocence? Is it sexual innocence? There's a few different kinds of innocences that I kind of want to narrow in on, because that'll be a little bit more specific to how I would be able to address that for you and really give you all of me in that kind of answer. So if you can answer a little bit more and clarify on innocence, that would definitely help me.
And then Josh.
Yeah, I saw that one too. The other thing I was going to say before I address this one is, if at any point in time you have questions for Mary that you don't feel are necessarily something that you want to bring up on air, feel free to reach out to Mary, to contact Mary, or to reach out to Tiffany or myself, and we will get you in touch with Mary so that you can have those conversations with Mary.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one, Ray asked, what should I do if I'm trying to find myself at 40 alone, feeling lost?
Whew.
Gosh, I wish these were live, that we can bring people on and see them face to face.
We actually can. We could have to send it to them, though.
Yeah, and that gets to be a little more
complicated. Yeah,
because we don't know what people will say once they get on air.
Oh yeah, we're streaming to so many places.
Platforms. Got you. Yep. No,
yeah. Now, if we pre-screen people and you want to set something up like that, where we do like a pre-screening of getting people, we can set something like we could set something up like that.
I've seen it go well and go bad, so that's why I usually.
If I was going to do a pre-screen, it would definitely be people that I knew and trust coming on to ask.
Melissa said she'd love that. Melissa's awesome. I know her very well.
Honestly, we could probably even get into bringing just a couple of people on that we really trust and get into some like really in-depth like therapy type sessions if you want. Yeah. So people can see.
Some kind of like shotgun coaching kind of thing. But I want to get to this answer. So when you ask, what should I do? I'm trying to find myself at 40, feeling alone and lost. The last part of your sentence really is clarifying that you're exactly where you need to be, because while you're finding yourself, you're not going to know yourself. So if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling alone, these are clear signs. Joshua mentioned it earlier, the night of the dark soul. There are certain parts of the journey that you're going to be having to do it alone. And it's going to feel like you're lost, but you're exactly where you need to be, because this is the clear sign that you are reframing and in the discovery process of yourself. So I would say you're exactly where you should be. And if you want to understand yourself a little bit better, meditation, mindfulness practice, anything that silences yourself so that you can really awaken your inner scape and your inner understanding of yourself. So eye gazing at a candle, closing your eyes and doing meditation, staring at the ocean, all of these things to just do something really simple so that you can enter a space of just quieting the mind. Another technique that you could tie into that, if you want to kind of double up on the workout there of meditation, is just making sure that in meditation, when things arise in the quieting of the moments, just to make sure that your belly is soft and you're in a state of non-attachment. You want to know yourself, you have to observe yourself. You want to know what your values are. look around you and notice your environment. Who are you serving?
Right. That reminds me of in The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle says
Yes.
you need to realize you are not the voice in your head. You are the one observing the voice in your head.
That
Exactly.
awareness behind the awareness. That's what I really had to, through that transcendental aspect, like with Eckhart Tolle, realizing that we're not necessarily this physical vessel. We're not the personality that we've created in this life. We are the presence behind, the experience, the awareness behind everything. And getting in touch with that higher aspect of ourself, or the higher self, or the soul, to your true essence, who you were before this world programmed you, before this world told you who to be.
Ray says, I meditate and walk a lot. She also said, thank you. I have a problem with the detachment.
With the detachment?
Yes. Just the detaching from things, the stepping back and not allowing that emotional attachment to things as they arise.
And detachment from external or internal as well. I'm wondering, there might be a thing with Ray of attachment to certain programs or certain things, aspects in life. And that may be where there's a hard time of letting some of that go, or just allowing it to be.
Almost all of us have a hard time with those.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, is learning how to release those attachments to those old programmings and those old belief styles. It says I hold on too much to life and things.
That's the external.
Okay, yeah. I hold on. So she's saying, are you trying to say that you have a hard time in meditation? I guess I'm trying to hone in here. You're having a hard time in meditation because you don't know how to observe yourself in meditation?
Maybe. That's what it sounds like.
Okay. You know what? I would say that that's fine. We're human. This is a practice. I can't tell you how many times I'm literally hosting a medicine ceremony, or I'm supporting somebody during their last breath, or holding grief for somebody. And these are powerful, transformative moments. And my mind goes, oh, did you unplug your straightening iron? Like, a thought's going to pop up in the head that I'm not.
It's, oh my God! Did I remember to tell so and so to pick up the kids at school while I got this appointment? And
push it. Just notice it and just brush it away for the moment. It's like in a transcendental meditation, where like practicing with breath work meditation, that might help. Every time you notice yourself getting distracted, pay attention to your breath.
That's what I do. I bring it back to the breath. Back to my client and pull it back in. So I guess what I'm saying is the practice, Ray. Learning who you are, learning your desires, learning the limiting beliefs that you have, knowing the expanded beliefs that you have beyond them, like all of these things of truly trying to know yourself is a practice.
Right.
And your practice is going to be built on a lifetime of people telling you many different things. So, being able to kind of navigate the void, the scary place where things don't exist, and then back and then have one foot here. You can jump back in the body, create some kind of safety around the meditation to where you can just maybe sidestep 1 foot, 1 inch at a time into the pool of your consciousness. You don't have to do all of this work at one time. It does.
One thing that we used to do when I trained in martial arts, one of the studies and practices that we got into is what we would refer to as like a walking meditation or a working meditation, where we're actually maintaining a meditative mind state while doing an activity.
It's like getting in the flow in art. When you're doing that, you're in the flow.
And it could be staying in that meditative mind state while taking a hike, going on a walk. Sometimes for us, it was about staying in that mind state while we was sparring with our partner, so that we learned to observe and allow things to flow, that we didn't try to anticipate and second guess, and just kind of, it's how we learned to open up for that intuition and being able to see what's going to happen, rather than going, oh, he's going to throw this punch. No, we learned to read the body, and we're staying in a mind state where we're not trying to control, we're just observing.
It's like
We're just
Taoism,
we're just in
going with the flow.
we're just in a state of being.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like what is it? Jeet Kune Do or any of those, that is part of it, right? The meditative aspect of getting in the flow with your body, and you're becoming one with that moment, one with your body, and you're not responding, you're almost predicting what's going to come next because you are in tune.
Well, and I think that's how it is for anyone that gets into any kind of really meditative type flow state. I would think that surgeons are almost in the same kind of meditative state, that they're in such a deep state of observation that what they're paying attention to, they're not focused on anything else other than just that. And that's a form of a meditative trance.
But instead of disassociating, you're actually going within.
Yeah, so there's going to be two different voices. There's going to be the meditation voice that feels expanded and alive and refreshing, and it's deepening something. And then there's going to be possibly that, like the numbing out. And you'll know the difference because nothing. You're going to feel the meditation, and you'll know if you're trying to resist something, because that'll be the reason why you're doing it.
Right.
That makes sense. The resistance itself.
Yeah.
That is part of the answer. It's a trigger.
Yeah. You'll know going in what you're doing it for, why you're doing it. And sometimes going into meditation to intentionally put a pause on the static of the world is very empowering.
That's where I started doing it, was just to chill the world out because everything was too much. And then I realized that as an artist, as a painter, I realized that I was already doing that when I would disappear in my art studio for 6 hours for a 4 foot by 4 foot crazy ass painting, that once I stopped and looked at it, I was like, holy crap. Like, that wasn't me. That was my awareness. That was a meditative flow. So that makes sense. That's like you're in that moment, you know the difference.
You'll know.
Yeah. So
I saw Canon respond to expanding on the innocence, which is two gates kind of blending together, which is the places that have not known love. And what we expected and did not receive.
I need a list of those. Those are amazing.
Yeah. I'll send them to Josh, and I'll send them to you so that you guys can put it out. This is, I love it. Right? It really just
we'll definitely put this out.
So, going back to Cannon's original question, because I can't pull up the thread. So, how do I handle the grief of innocence? The loss.
Yeah, the grief of innocence.
The question is, how do you address grieving the loss of innocence?
A breach of trust.
Trust. Okay, got you. Okay, thank you so much, Cannon, for coming back and for clarifying that. That definitely helps me kind of point my arrow more directly towards your intention behind the question. Loss of innocence, like I said, it's two different gates blending together. I would always start at any feeling where somebody has been the reason why I'm feeling a loss or a betrayal. I always start, if I'm really intentionally now wanting to work with that grief, I start with forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't have to be overnight. It can take you 20 years to get to building that foundation for yourself, to get to the next foundation of where you want to go with it. But I would start with forgiveness. And really fortifying your vulnerability, and making sure that this betrayal of trust stays isolated to the people that were involved with it and doesn't bleed out to any place where you feel you have to protect yourself. Let it be a learning lessons for how you can approach any situation, whatever this breach of trust was, differently. Let yourself learn from it. But foundation would be trust, and seeing if you can build that trust. Or excuse me, I said forgiveness, and then building in that trust, I guess, as well too. I'm channeling, so trust came out, so I'm going to keep going with it.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's almost like when, as children, our parents, like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or that, and I'll never forget when I realized all of that was not true. I was like crushed. I was like betrayed. They've been lying to me. And my whole world, then I realized I couldn't really trust my parents as much as I thought. And it was like that moment of innocence where all of a sudden I realized there was manipulation and I was little bitty. And it was like a grief thing. And I wonder if some of that could be what Cannon's talking about, like that betrayal of that core trust in the people that are supposed to guide us and love us and lead us through this world. And that's where what you just said about not allowing that to overflow into everything and keeping it contained to that situation. That just resonated so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then it could easily bleed. And that situation deserves all of your attention when it comes up, how it comes up, and really using discernment and making sure that you use whatever lessons came from this betrayal to observe others, let them reveal them to you as they do, and then you get to now have all these other tools that this betrayal gave you. Life is going to show you the opposite of what you're calling in sometimes. So you get really specific on the thing and the people and the stuff that you want around in your awareness and within your field. And so I also look at betrayal as not so much of mistrust, like although the mistrust happened, the way that I alchemize it through is really being like, cool, I know now that's not ever a situation I want to be in again. I know that now. I know that I can aim my arrow far away from that every single time.
Right.
And I use that as my way of shifting and directing my attention to my things. And I give thanks for the thing that came through that showed me the opposite of what I was desiring.
That's that forgiveness aspect too, like as we, seeing the humanness and maybe in like, if it was parents or, an ex, or seeing the humanness within them as well and forgiving that too, and then forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and that can dive into several different aspects of dealing with trauma and grief. And like where Mary was talking about, it can deal with several different gates. And one of those can definitely be that ancestral gate.
Yes.
Where you have generational things that's been passed down from generation to generation. This can happen with abuse, where this abuse, is passed down from one generation to the next generation to the next generation to the next generation. And with that comes that grief, that guilt, that shame, that hurt. All of that comes along with that. And learning to deal with that and the magnitude of everything that comes with that is massive.
Inner child work for me really helped with that deep inner child, like meditating, going into the most traumatic moments as a child that I can recall, and sending myself there as like an angel or higher self aspect, and giving my younger self what she needed at that moment. And that like a shamanic travel, I guess, in a way, that's really helped. Do you like, what about inner child aspects with that? Because we all have that inner child within us.
Well, I think you just used the right words, and it was really cool to hear you describe it, because it's very similar to how I see it. Stick with me on this one. It's going to sound like a tangent, but it's not.
Go for it.
I truly believe the ability to meditate or be with or make enough room for all of our inner children is time traveling.
Yes, right there.
Yeah. So I said that, I was like, she gets it. You get it. Yeah, it is time traveling. It's not necessarily how we thought it would be like in the movies, but it is something, because it changes something about you on a cellular level. It changes something about you, about how you see the world, and how you see the world is how you shape yourself. So it's truly something so simple and yet so complicated, but inner child work is definitely a part of all that. And I did just see a question pop up, but I was right.
It was here. Melissa said, how do I rediscover my soul after severe trauma? And that is such a beautiful question, Melissa.
Yeah, I think you were saying it too, Tiff. You're on to that question before we even answered it, which was really being with yourself at the time that you were fractaled.
Mm-hmm.
It causes us to be fractaled out, and parts of us are still stopped in certain places. And thank God we have the ability to kind of take hits in the body and hold it and be with it until our body is like, okay, now you're ready. You can hold this now.
Yeah.
So, you know, rediscovering the soul can look like inner child work. I would say a best way to get in touch with the soul is through playfulness.
Yes.
Yep.
Is through curiosity, like a child would. So really kind of going back to and trauma is such a, like another thing with, you know, the just being able to read words on the screen. I don't want to make lightly of your trauma either.
She said it was intense. It was a betrayal that really traumatized her.
But I'm glad I'm kind of picking up on that. I don't want to bypass or not bring light to the fact that this is a trauma and it's big. And rediscovering the soul after that is really an interesting process, because you've done it time and time again already before this trauma. I'm sure, you know, this is something that we've been practiced on, to be disappointed, to be hurt in varying ways, and we've always found ourselves again. So I do know that you will find yourself again, and when you do, you'll really never left. You were always right there with your soul. It had never left you, and this rediscovering piece is a part of the. And it's
I want to step in and say something real quick.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that you need to make sure that you're realizing, Melissa, is you're discovering something new. You're not rediscovering something old. You can't become what you was in the past. That is gone. You will never.
Look.
You will never be that again. Okay. Yes.
Yes, that's what I did, and I didn't even realize it was a thing until Josh told me, and I was like.
But what you want to do is you need to realize that you're becoming something new. You're becoming something different. You're not. So many people get fixated on trying to become their old self.
Gotta let her go.
Within this whole aspect of dealing with trauma, with dealing with grief, with dealing with loss. They want to go back to the old because that was what was comfortable. That's what they knew. That's what was familiar. The new them, they're in the process of this discovery, and it's scary because they don't know where they're going, what they're becoming, who they're becoming, or where this journey is going. But got a secret for you. That's called life. And it's going to happen
or a moth.
over and over and over and over. The minute that you think, okay, I've got this, it's going to start all over again. In one way, shape, form, or another, it's going to start all over again.
This is beautiful. Think of yourself as a phoenix. Channel that phoenix energy. You talk about the fire.
I love that I think Melissa's written fire a couple times.
She has. Transformation.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're in the transformative period, but you know, the fire, it also brings the ashes, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's burning down, and I know it feels hard to kind of walk in the ashes alone and to kind of rediscover the new part of you, which was so beautifully put by Joshua. That I like to think of my traumas now, whether they're past traumas or something that I'm faced with that's new, that I've never walked before, just having like the tools and the knowledge that we can kind of use practical practices when things come towards us. But one thing that I like to use is I'll picture when it's the right time in my grieving cycle. So bear in mind, some things are heavier and some things are lighter, but I like to picture that instance, that trauma is a new seed that got buried in me.
Yes, and the ashes fertilize it.
Yes. Oh, I like how you just did that. I wasn't going to say that, but absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Ashes have purpose too. Think about it.
Yep. And it's being fertilized by all of that fire. But
And that's your seed you're planting. Yourself, part of yourself.
the seed, if you think about the story of the seed, that's why I really resonated with it. It's not just so much the fact that it's a seed being planted in the body, it's the fact that the story of the seed is like, it's not choosing to go in the ground, and yet it's now surrounded by darkness, and it has to agitate, it has to move, it has to create enough friction in its body to then pop out into more unknown. And then trust the fact that whatever it's doing through this agitation, however it's harmonizing with what is in that moment, it's gonna reach the surface eventually.
Yeah, I love the whole
Beautiful.
analogy of they thought they buried me, but they didn't realize I was a seed.
I've said that one forever. That's like my motto, y'all.
Yeah, there's something really so, when we look at nature and nature's looking back at us, it's kind of always given us the perfect antidote or lesson within itself. And the seed is such a powerful one. I love the seed.
And that's that connecting with Gaia. Melissa, you could even do something like, I know, like in Wicca, like at the beginning of like the new year, which is spring for us, a lot of will plant a seed, and they'll pick a tree, like an oak tree or you know, a fruit tree or something, and they'll plant that as celebration. And with that, they're setting their intentions to grow along with this plant as it comes up through as a seedling, as it turns into a tree. And as they nurture the plant, it's also symbiotic to them nurturing themselves.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that.
It's like a physical connection. And it's a reminder.
Hello, you're not that late.
Hi, Runes and Ravens. Oh, look, Melissa. She says 3 beautiful souls. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know, right? Goddess in love. I got a question. What about like those of us that have like had like a near-death experience? And like I said, I've had 2 full-blown ones, out of body, in the hospital. I died. I mean, it was full on. And I had the last one in December. And Josh has been having to help me because it's like reintegrating into who I am and bringing forth that experience of having that choice that time, not being sitting back like I was the first time, but I had the choice to go ahead and cross over or to stay in this physical vessel. And I chose to stay. I said, you know, I'm needed here. There's too much left to do. I'm going to stay. But it's like I was right at that rainbow bridge, like right at that, okay, I can choose to cross over now. And trying to integrate those aspects and all of that into who I am in this physical body at this moment has been really hard.
I would say, what about that experience are you bringing back into your everyday awareness?
Connection. Divine feminine. It was very much divine feminine on the other side for me. So very mother aspect, what I would call, you know, everyone has their own experiences based on what they need. Mine was very maternal mother. So I've been trying to mother myself more. And I've been trying to give myself the love that a mother would give, that unconditional love, that grace. I've been working on trying to incorporate that in my daily life. So that could be part of that.
Yeah, I think then you're probably integrating it. You're integrating it. If you're being able to kind of, you know, formalize that and say, you know, and make that quick connection, then
makes sense.
You're integrating it. And integration is a thumbprint, a fingerprint. It's so unique. What you experience is a medicine experience, but you know, one you didn't have to sit with ayahuasca or psilocybin or 5-MeO DMT.
I do ketamine once a month for fibro, and I have full-on experiences with angels.
I look at the near-death experiences very similar to a peak experience in medicine.
It is similar. The out of body looking down.
Yeah, so I would say, just like I would say for my clients that I hold space for medicine, I would say as long as you're integrating it and you're being with what that experience showed you, which was
Yes.
powerful, then you're doing it. You're
Okay.
doing it.
It's a
All
long
right.
process because it has to kick out some old doubts, some old
Yeah.
programs. It's like I'm having to make room to integrate that newer awareness, basically.
That's great.
All right. We've got some.
We do have some comments.
Yeah, we got some more comments coming in. So,
Thank you so much for that answer. You helped me, gave me confidence.
Good. Happy to.
All right, we'll start off with this one. This is Runes and Ravens, who is Diana, who will be a guest here next Thursday.
Awesome.
We are going to be discussing healing from religious trauma. So
good. Thank
That
you.
is, girl. I'm right there on this wagon too.
I'm right there on that wagon as well. Thank you, lady.
if you want to join us next week, Mary, you're more than welcome to. So
Yeah, it is about religious trauma, our programming.
Mm-hmm.
But this one says, I dreamed a lifetime until 33 years old once, and I woke up at 14 in this life. Of course, I remember most of those years up to 14, but at the same time, the life of that person to 33. I don't remember those 33 years now, but when I woke up, I panicked, afraid of my kids I left behind, but I was 14. And then their next question was, I'm curious how people go about finding a death doula. When do they decide it's time for one? And I do know that she is interested in talking with you about death doula and that line of work and stuff as well.
So I'm going to talk to you too, because I'm like, I got questions.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start, because it seems like a 3-layered yummy cake that she brought to the table. So I'll start with the first layer, which I like I said, I can't read it, but which was so this lifetime you were 14 and you had a dream and it was this whole lifetime experience. Okay, so quick question, what was your year of 14 like? I'm very curious to kind of start there. I would like to know a little bit more about what was happening at the age of 14. It might have been like a very whatever year. I was 14, nothing at the top of your awareness, or it might be something to share. But I would start right there, because that's definitely coming up as
something brought it on.
She said 14 is when she came fully into her gifts.
Her awakening, her past life.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because that I was going to relay this to your moon cycle. Did you start your moon cycle at 13, 14?
Holy crap, that does have something to do with it.
Yeah.
See, I was 16 and my stuff came back on.
Yeah, so this was your initiation, and you were able to kind of cross quantum radio stations and experience. So it was very real. What you experienced was real. It was on a different radio station, different dial. You were able to kind of tune into that radio.
It was
station.
13.
Okay, yeah. So this makes sense. 13 is when we get activated as womb holders. That, this can be extreme in some and very noticeable or very subtle in other women. But it sounds like you were able to have
Yes.
evidence that everything is happening here all at once. I wouldn't grieve that life, because it's still happening right now.
And she's still connected.
Yeah, and you're still connected to that life, that thread, that thing that is showing you evidence of a very non-linear experience that we get to have in this life when we start tuning into those frequencies and radio stations. And for you, the initiation showed you a lot, and that was really powerful. So I would say be with the grief of whatever's coming up with that, but maybe see if you can kind of not identify too much with it and be more of like that was an experience and an initiation. If you can hold it like that, that might start to take different texture a little bit and soften. And
can you imagine the mourning or the grief that she panicking about her children that she had just been experiencing this life with, and she wakes up and she's 14. I mean, that's a shocker right there. There's some grief.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, to me, and the way my understanding of realms and dimensions and stuff works, to me, it feels almost like part of her gifts was allowing her to see through to
Uh-huh.
another dimension and another life and experiencing that
Of
life,
herself.
right? Which is another possibility that could have existed. That all these possibilities,
Or it
and
does
it's
exist.
right.
Yeah.
It's that whole multiversal concept, which, funny enough, you're seeing pop up everywhere now.
Everywhere.
Like
The collective is
everywhere.
getting it.
And the funny thing is, it's been going on in comic books for like 20, 30 years, and comic book nerds have been like, actually longer than that, like 40 years or more.
Look what, her 14. This makes sense, Josh. She
Okay.
said she was in the midst of her religious cage cult life, said it out loud. Wow, I think I'm going to be doing spiritual work for a living somehow. It was
Okay.
that moment.
Let me throw this out there to everyone involved in this conversation. Do you want me to send her an invite to pop on live with us if she's up for it?
Of course, I'm good with it.
Yep. Diana, you want an invite to pop into the studio live with us if you're up for it?
It's kind of like that when Cannon was talking about that grief of betrayal or loss of innocence. It's almost like when we're indoctrinated into like a certain religious programming. Like I was raised Southern Baptist and I was terrified of hell when I was a child. I was having existential crises at 6 years old thinking, oh my gosh, I thought a bad thought. Am I going to hell? You know? And it was, I'll never forget some of that. And then when I realized that, wait a second, what my reality, what I know to be reality is completely different than what they're telling me. And I had to learn to seek out the information. That's when I delved into all different kinds of books as a child that most children never would be seen dead with. But I was on a spiritual mission because there was that aspect of knowing that this stuff isn't quite true. It sounds kind of like that maybe what like that experience of that past life dream was triggering her to that knowingness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
don't even know that it was a past life. I think it was an alternate life.
Or yeah, a current. Well, in a way, some of it's. I mean, aren't we a soul or that incarnates in multi-dimensionalities all at once? So it definitely could have been a parallel existence.
Yeah. So she said she can't join because she's got 5 kids, 2 hound dogs, all going nuts with a storm.
She was Romanian Pentecostal, the same type of like death experiences of hell, you know?
See, I grew up in that full gospel non-denominational church, which is very much similar. It's honestly where that white national Christian
Wasps.
like evangelical mindset comes out of. That is literally those. That's literally those kind of churches. And I remember growing up, like the stories of death, and like I feared death as a kid because
me too
of the hellfire and brimstone sermons they would give in church. That if you died and you wasn't right with Jesus, oh God, it was all kinds of bad. No matter what, you're going to hell.
And if you're a gifted child, like I was an empath, I saw auras. I was clairvoyant as a child. I'm a medium. I had a little spirit girl as my best friend, and my mom was terrified of me, you know. And instead of like, so I shut that stuff down until later. I had no choice. And I'm wondering, so many of us kind of go through that, and then we kind of grieve through that process of that child who, instead of being lifted up and embraced for their gifts and their abilities, instead we were shut down, and we kind of grieved that for ourselves.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's part of that awakening, I think.
Yeah. Religion is a necessary evil that we take too far.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's exceeded its purpose in some ways to where it overcrosses too much.
Yeah, well, you know, anytime you try to define the energy that we're referring to, the energy that lives through us, life force energy, Gaia, God, Krishna, Jesus, anytime you try to name it, you take away from it already.
Exactly. In the original Gnostic teachings, that is one thing that Yeshua taught, is that, the divine is underneath that rock and that tree in you and in me. And that's something that, like, modern religion kind of takes that away from us and says, no, God isn't in you. God is outside of you. And it's like, wait a second, but I feel it, and as children, we're still so connected.
Yep.
Well, it's like I work with plant medicines. Mary, I know you work with plant medicines as well. You've talked about it before. And doing plant medicine ceremonies and stuff as part of your coursework and stuff that you do when you train death doulas. You have a plant medicine ceremony that's part of it.
Yes.
You do training?
Yeah.
And
I can segue into that question she was asking, right?
Okay, well, what I was going to say, from what I was about ready to say, and working with the plant medicines and stuff, and that plant medicine work, I've realized that just the way that you work with pretty much all aspects kind of changes a little bit, and the way that you start looking at life and death and grief. And especially when you start working with things like ayahuasca, which is known as the vine of the soul or the vine of death, where you're working with crossing, boundaries and borders and going,
Here's a good question
to different aspects. So, and just the way that works with things, and the way that works with the healing of the trauma and the grief and everything as well. It's.
And what about like in like hospital situations, like Runes and Ravens kind of moving like to this, Runes and Ravens asked, on the topic of death doulas, are there specific laws you have to watch out for in that direction of a career? And I know, like, as a Reiki master and as a teacher, I've done some work, in end of life stuff, and I've had to really CYA in some of that, because if you're not a chaplain, if you're not, if you don't have this registration with the state, then you don't really hold like the same, I don't know,
you don't
licensure to do it. Like, is there something about that?
Yeah, so it is not currently governed by any entity like a death doula would have, and I think that that's great, and I also think it's not great at the same time.
It can be limiting.
Yeah. It's limiting, but it also creates boundaries and scope of practice and the things that I teach through my school. But there's, going into a hospital. So there's two ways that you can be a death doula. You can be hired by your client, and therefore you supersede any kind of needing pass or anything for the hospital.
Okay.
You're a hired person, you are supposed to be there, or you can volunteer in hospice, and then you're governed by the hospice rules and regulations, which are typically governed by the state law and federal regulations. So so there are different laws that you can be under as a doula, but it is not governed by any outside entity yet, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, like, with me, I'm part of the International Association of Reiki Practitioners, blah, 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 to CYA, to, like, verify, validify, what I do and who I am.
Yes.
And there's, like, we have, like, legal insurance that can cover us, stuff like that.
Yes.
And so that's what I was going to say. You could probably get something similar as a doula.
Yes, you can do all of those things as a doula. NEDA Alliance.
Nice.
NEDA Alliance.org. If you're
I'm writing it down.
Find a death doula in a specific state, you can look on the directory. So it's a great thing to kind of plug in here. And
I'm putting it down.
Yeah, NEDA Alliance.org.
.org. Got it.
In any state. They've all been accredited through NEDA. I'm on there as well. So you can look there if you're trying to find a doula, because I know that was one of her questions as well. And then when do you was another part of the Raven cake. I love the layers. Raven, you're awesome. when you would want to hire a doula, there's, I work with clients all across the board. So I work with clients during treatment. So they're not hospice or palliative care yet. I work with people while they're in end of life. I work with people who are actively dying. And then I work with people, maybe I don't even know the person who died, and I'm just supporting the family with their grief.
Yes.
So you'll need a doula because you'll feel like you need extra support in any one of these kind of arenas.
Girl, I'm going to be getting in touch with you because I've needed a doula for a while. Josh will tell you.
I've been telling her she needs to get in touch with you, so it was just the timing.
I deal with a lot of close calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a matter of timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, that alignment, where things like we meet the right people at the right times that we need them.
Yes, absolutely. I truly believe that.
And Raven says she's sorry. She really is interested. And don't apologize, sister. We're interested too.
Questions. That's why I was trying to make sure I addressed all of them because they were all so important. Like, good and valid for what we're creating in this space. So I appreciate them.
Well, it's like honestly, because I mean, Runes and Ravens is a practitioner as well, and makes content as well and stuff. I'm not giving anything away. They're on their business page information right now. So, it goes back to something one of my mentors and an elder told me when I was talking to him. I was telling him when I first met Mary that I was interested in going through the training and everything, and going through her study and coursework to get certified through her academy as a death doula, an end-of-life caregiver. And I'm also going to a university to be ordained as a metaphysical minister. And so what I want to do is I want to take this and end up working as an end-of-life chaplain is what I want to specialize in. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on to getting that done. There's a lot of volunteer work and a lot of education, a lot of schooling, a lot of training. But I was talking to we all have
our own paths, and it all leads us in a similar direction. It's so freaking badass.
Well, and it's I was talking to one of my mentors, and he told me, he said, here's the way that he looks at it. He said, any training that you can pick up along your path, pick it up. He says, you learn it. He says, you know it. He says, think of it as another arrow that you can put in your quiver. He said, you may never need to pull that arrow out of your quiver. Never need it. It may stay there for the rest of your life. But if you ever need it, it's there.
Heck yeah.
And to me, that is just like, even if you don't end up planning to work as, say, a death doula, but you're going to work in a field where you're dealing with people dealing with grief, or you're working with people dealing with loss in some kind of way, shape, or form.
We all are, so it's everybody.
Also, for people, I've had students that have joined my course that are like, I'm never going to sit bedside with anybody. I'm not interested, but my parents are going to be dying in the next 10, 15 years. And
right there.
Or I want to establish more of my relationship with death, and this kind of curriculum kind of helps me bridge that.
That's what I
need.
As
a way for them coming to terms with their own death.
Yeah.
That one. Woo-wee.
Mm-hmm.
That one changes you too.
Oh yeah, it changes your cells in your body. When people are, how old are you? And I tell them my age, they're like, oh wow, what do you do? And I'm like, I make friends with death every single day. It's my beauty regimen.
Girl, that is awesome. Runes and Ravens, absolutely. And there's so many of us now. There's so many in the pagan community that we need that extra support. We do.
Oh, I love what you wrote at the end. Christians have all that, their help and support, and everyone else needs that too. Amen.
Well, it's like, my mom was just in the hospital, ICU. She was dying. She has a feeding tube now in her stomach. And Josh he witnessed me. I had a total breakdown, and I had to go sit in the chapel for like an hour and a half because I was just having it out with that Yahweh guy. And the Pentecostal preacher who was the chaplain there, she comes in, and I was like, look, I am a spiritual person. I am not. And she sat there with me though and held space and understood and was able to do it in a it also came back to some Christianity, some books that I should read. But it's still, it was that like where I was missing having somebody like me to hold space for me. Does that make sense?
See, and that's part of why I want to go into the chaplaincy as well, because I think we need more interfaith style ministers in chaplain work.
It's hard. I checked into it here in Texas, and it's hard to get it. Like, you almost have to be Christian.
Well, just fool them and then just get in there.
Yeah. What are you?
God made me this way. He gave me this brain. Sorry.
What are you?
Deceptive. Yeah.
Deceptive. What are you? I'm deceptive.
I'll fit in. I'm deceptive. I'll fit in great in the Christian community.
As a death doula, if I'm serving somebody who's dying and they're Christian, I'm a Christian. If they're Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist.
Exactly.
I'm Jewish. If they're anything, I am supporting their myth about life, and we need a myth about life. And I think at the end of the day, religion just gives us really good myths about what could be possible at the end of life that maybe makes this life a little less scary. And
and like the region of the United States I live in, it could be backwoods Appalachia belief system that someone has that's not any kind of mainstream religion. They can have their own traditions and stuff all around death and how it goes.
Look at Appalachian granny magic. I mean, that stuff right there, that is all throughout the Appalachians.
Appalachians are a portal.
Girl, I'm right there. I believe it. That whole area.
I live right at the foothills of the Appalachia.
Of course you do.
He's right there by the Serpent Mound, which kind of still creeps me out because that place is a vortex.
Yeah. Of course.
That is so interesting. Okay. So that makes sense though, like in an omnistic perspective, like as a death doula or as like someone who's like a spiritual life coach, like I've got my certification in spiritual life coaching, or someone who's a Reiki master, someone who, whenever we're helping someone, as interfaith, or as more omnistic people, it doesn't matter to us what their faith is, because to us, all faith is faith. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Yeah, same approach. Absolutely same approach. And it can be really beautiful. I mean, to be honest, when people do have a myth about the religious myths about life and end of life, it makes my job a lot easier because I know exactly how to serve them now.
True, because you understand the programming and the mythology of that programming.
In the Rolodex, like, well, these are the things that are, and it kind of makes it a little bit easier to formulate and hold space.
Once you know the traditions and belief systems and everything else around it, then you can build the program to fit that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you ever work with the families at the same time? Like you do both, right? You work with like a person and you work with the family too. You can do both. Yes. Beautiful.
I typically work with the person more one-on-one during diagnosis or the beginning stages if they're a client in that kind of stage, and then I bleed over to the care team as the end of life gets closer and closer, and then there's the grieving process, and then I really kick in to turn myself towards the family at that time as well.
Also, probably like people who are diagnosed with something that is terminal, or they're in that situation with something terminal, that's where you would step in and help them with that grieving aspect of having a terminal illness. That's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is hired me in diagnosis, we're not talking about end of life stuff unless they want to. I'm just showing them how to be empowered by choosing the medicine and the treatments they're choosing at that point. And being
I needed you a long time ago.
Yeah, applied in them at that time, that's what we're with. And then I'm training them to hold their drip as the IVs are going in, and picturing sacred geometry, and really claiming, like, this isn't somebody giving me the medicine. This is me claiming this medicine. This is what I'm choosing. I'm welcoming in this medicine. This is mine. And I'm so grateful, and just really, really shifting the way that they hold treatment. And just really supporting the dark times of treatment as well. It can be really confusing time for people in treatment, because they're chasing a cure. They're chasing themselves before they were diagnosed, and
that makes sense. And then, like, with so many of us, like, I know, like, with the lupus stuff, like, mine's severe. Mine affects multiple organs, you name it. I had the hardest time, like, especially like within the new age community, which I love my new agey people, but, and like me as a Reiki practitioner, I didn't know what I was studying Reiki for. I just knew I needed to learn it to help myself. And, but it all comes together in time. But, like, being someone who is not afraid to say, like, hey, I have chronic illness. I deal with this shit all the time. It was your vibration is low because you deal with disability, or, you're not a high enough vibration. You're not healing yourself. And I was like, no, you're missing the point, man. Like, like, this is part of my shit.
Yeah. One of the funniest things I ever had was I dealt with an abdominal hernia for about 2.5 years before surgeons would finally end up fixing it. I had to get to where it was an emergency issue for them to finally fix it. Struggle with them to finally get it and stuff. And I was back and forth, and I was trying to do the podcast during that time and stuff. And I had to cancel with a guest, and I had to tell him, say, hey, man, I've got to cancel. I'm sorry. I've got to go to the emergency room. I'm having trouble with the hernia. I got to go get medical help. He's like, well, he said, well, it's just some unresolved anger issues that you need to let go. And that's the only reason that you've got this hernia. If you do that, it'll take care of it. And I'm like, I don't think you medically understand what a hernia is.
Yep.
It's not something that's going to get better because unresolved anger issues get taken care of. This needs actual medical care. This needs, an actual surgeon to come in and do, what they specialize in. This isn't,
it's your fault.
Right. Let me talk my feelings out, and this severe medical issue that I have will just mystically, magically go away.
Well, I had someone tell me lupus isn't real, that I created it, yes, everything is energy. Yes, I get it. There are emotions connected to this. There's grief underneath it. I freaking get it. But genetically, this is something very physical. It is something that is very testable. It is something. But then I was told, I've fallen too much into that Western medicine, and I need to quit all my medications. And I was like, okay, bye-bye. Nope. Because it's a holistic approach is what we need.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we need both. I think we're in a time and in our awareness where we can have it all. Have
exactly.
Medical team, take what you want, leave what you don't. You have free will there. You open the full spirit door. I want all doors open all the time. I don't want to be limiting myself to one, and that's what I tell my clients as well. You can be in the medical system and deeply connected to source at the same time. I tell my clients healing happens in the waiting room.
That is so true. And that's where I had some like, you can't be as connected to spirit because you've got all these medical issues and you have to do all these treatments. I'm like, that makes me more connected. I'm like, da, da, da.
Yeah.
I was saying a lot of traditions
about like religion and just symbolism that religion can bring about. If you just look at the Christian text, Jesus, Yeshua, only fucked with. Sorry, wasn't I supposed to mess? He only messed with the people who were thrown away by society. Those were the people that the portals were open. The magic can be touched. They can be seen, fully open and willing to be seen because they had this part of themselves that were cracked open. You got to be cracked open in order to be changed and transformed. And so Jesus didn't mess with the people who were healthy.
The wounded healers.
Right.
He worked with the lepers. He worked with the blind. He was a necromancer. He brought someone back from the dead. You know, I mean, he was, I believe he was a Reiki. He used Reiki. He used chi. He used spirit, holy, whatever you want to call it. You know, I mean, straight up manifestation techniques, law of attraction.
Absolutely.
Oh, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. Runes and Ravens asked earlier, how long does it take to become, how long does training take to become a death doula?
So there's, like I said, there's no governing body. So if you go online right now, and I haven't done it in a while, but I've done it periodically, there are no schools that are out there that are longer than like 3-day intensives, a couple workshops, or something like that. My school is a 3-month certification.
Nice. That's what I do. Reiki. I do it over several months. It's not a weekend crash course. We're working this shit.
It's an initiation, and so my course is 90 days.
Beautiful.
But that's for my school. So typically, if you look out there, you're going to see weekend intensives. But Anam Cara Academy is a mystery school, so we definitely leave a lot of time for that mystery to evolve. Every single one of my doulas, I've trained women who were waitresses.
Oh, yep. I think we've either froze or lost her.
She froze.
Yeah. I did post the link to her school in the group. There you are. You froze for a second. So you said you've trained doulas who were, and that's when ladies who were.
Doulas who were waitresses just looking to build and be in this. I've helped people who are Reiki masters and certified, and people in the spiritual community, and then
it's an aspect of it. It's so important.
I've also trained nurses and doctors, emergency room doctors, who are with death all day, every day, and they still don't know how to navigate the energetics of it. So I
have a sister who's 30 plus year RN nurse. She's worked nursing homes. She's worked emergency rooms. She worked emergency rooms all through COVID. She said the worst thing that she sees is how they handle death.
The way death is treated like it's demonized in a lot of ways, it's not seen for the transformation or the portal, as Mary mentioned earlier, that it is.
Well, she said, and her big thing is, even when they know that death is inevitable, the way that they attach it or attack death from a medical standpoint, because that's their training, fight death at all cost, unless they're told otherwise. That is what the medical personnel will do, unless they are given strict orders to not do so. And she said, there's times where she said these people just needed a death with some dignity. They weren't given that in this opportunity. We knew as staff, there was no saving them, but we had to do everything because that's what protocol demands.
A do not resuscitate is something that would legally.
But that's only if that do not resuscitate is put into place.
Exactly. A lot of my older family did do those because they didn't want to die without dignity.
I had people that had DNRs. We had one on Mom when she passed because
I thought about doing one.
We knew where she was, but there's moments where they can bring you back and it's legit, so they can pull you back from that edge. But
it's like, can you do like a DNR for certain circumstances, or is it like just pure DNR?
You can. Yeah.
Okay.
There's DNR that's like you can get really specific. Be like, well, if there's brain damage.
Yeah, let me go, man.
Yeah. There's different levels of the DNR that you can get specific with.
Oh, awesome. You just answered a question for me because I need to go and do my will and I want to do a DNR, but I was researching into it and it's kind of hard to find good info.
Yeah. Google the state you're in. That would be a
Texas is
yeah.
And see, and this is kind of the information that you bring to your students as well, is like where to find this kind of information so they can take this to clients, because this is, DNR is a legitimate end of life deal, which a lot of times that's going to be discussed by a hospice team, stuff along that line.
What happens with someone who isn't in hospice, like me? I went in with a freaking blood clot in my heart, and it was like I don't have. It wasn't hospice, like for someone like me, it eventually could be something like that again.
I say get ahead of it when you can.
I love it.
What your wishes are long before you have to be in a situation to tell people. The more forward thinking you can be and planning what all the different scenarios could look like for yourself, I think it just clears up the present bandwidth. It's a good exercise.
I love that. Mm-hmm. And it's a smart move. It's a CYA.
Yes, it's a CYA.
Cover your ass, baby.
Cover your ass. That's it. I love it.
Teachers, all teachers.
And Mary,
CYA.
And Mary, you can cuss on my show. I don't care.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Girl, we throw the F-bomb. You know what? That clears the chakras.
Good. It does.
We've got hi Steph. Okay, Bruins and Ravens. So she almost died in 2011 from meningitis. They didn't tell my family I was dying. They tucked me away in a back room and stopped coming to medicate me. I pulled through after 4 days, and the doctor told me I didn't expect you to live past Thursday. It was Saturdays. Girl, that's she said hospitals can be awful, and that, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrible. But you're in a system, and systems don't care.
Nope.
You are in a robot when you are in a hospital, and you're in a robot not because there aren't people there, but because the people are governed by the robot.
Well, and so many people don't even know something like a DNR exists. Like what Clarissa just said, her own father, which Josh helped with this situation, her dad didn't have a DNR, and was he basically brain dead, Josh?
He had 2 heart attacks. He was resuscitated twice, and under 45 minutes. He was under 45 minutes. There was brain damage. There was no coming back, but the physical body was holding on.
Yes.
And so until they actually went in and pulled care and went through the process, and then it was even a couple-day process once
for him to die.
Support was pulled, which happened with my mother too. When we pulled support from my mother, she had a massive stroke over. The whole right hemisphere of her brain was gone, and it was continuing to bloom into the left hemisphere of her brain. It was a stroke that was induced by COVID-related complications. So it was under the COVID lockdown. She was in an ICU unit when it happened. We went in, pulled care. She held on. We pulled care on a Monday, and it was a Wednesday morning before she passed away finally. That was just. It was just the body's process of having to go through everything to release everything, all the stuff that they've been pumping into that body to keep it going.
Yeah.
And it's just that whole process, and it once again comes to that dying with dignity aspect.
That's so important.
But I gotta say, the ICU team there done an amazing job with handling things. Literally up until the stroke happened, we thought she was coming home the following week. We was expecting her back home in a couple of days. And then the stroke happened out of the blue, and no one expected it, seen it coming.
Yeah.
But apparently that was a major complication that they were starting to see with COVID patients at that time, was
the heart complications. In my IVIG treatments, they're starting to use the IVIG to help people to prevent strokes that are coming from long COVID, is what they're calling it. It causes inflammation in the heart itself, enlargement of the heart.
You're getting kudos on your tattoo.
Isn't it gorgeous? It's a Luna moth, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah. Let's see. Pam said you need to be careful with a DNR when you reach that point that you don't want any more medical. Some say no food to allow the person to die. Yeah,
that's where you got to be specific with it. That's where I wasn't sure how specific you can get.
You can get
Like,
really,
don't quit feeding me and have me starve to death if I'm sitting there and I can live, you know? Like,
Yeah, like my grandmother, she had a DNR on my mom or on my dad's side. She had leukemia and osteoporosis. So if her heart was to stop and they was to give her chest compressions, they would literally
see,
cause
I have
her more
osteo.
pain and suffering
Mm-hmm.
from the bone breakage and
Yep.
everything else, which that would have just progressed the
I don't want that. Don't break my ribs.
everything else even worse. It would just complicate things
Mhm.
so much worse. It was one of those. She said that, no, I don't want that. It's just going to make my last days just
Worse.
miserable. I don't want that. If I'm going to go, let me go. And that was again one of those choosing to die with dignity.
I'm right there with her. It's, I've got the osteo in my hips and my spine from 12 years of steroids for lupus and the arthritis that comes with the osteo. And, if they were to give me chest compressions, they would break my ribs in a heartbeat, just like with your grandma.
Well, they'll break most people's ribs with them, but the thing with grandma and the point that she was at, she would have never healed back.
Exactly.
There was no point that she would have healed. She was 88 years old.
Oh God, Pam.
So,
yes, that is cruel. That is not okay.
Hold
yeah.
on. I want to ask Pam a question real quick, but before I react to that, I want to ask Pam, what was your sister in the hospital for?
Yes, true. And she's in Texas. Pam is in Texas too.
If you're dying, do not feed me food. Starve me, because having food in your system during the dying process makes dying way more harder than it needs to. Your body will often people will stop wanting to eat on their own. They'll start rejecting food. So the more food that's in your body, the more difficult it is to die. So I'm wondering if where your sister was at on with this, because it might have been a thing where that was going to be better for her so that her body could do what it needed to do, or was she asking for food and they rejected her? I would like clarity around that comment.
Is it kind of like how animals, like I know when my Chihuahua, she was getting ready to cross that rainbow bridge and she would not eat for me for anything, not chicken nuggets, I could give her the Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, and she wouldn't do it.
I notice families get a lot more tied up in the food aspect than the actual person who's dying, because food is a love language too. We've celebrated. You've always eaten my chicken and you've always loved my pasta.
Exactly.
It's a very personal thing for families, but the body.
It's a bonding thing.
Yeah. So,
and it's more for the living than for the one that's dying. If you think about it, I mean, I was being selfish. I kept trying to get my Chihuahua, and then finally I was like, okay, baby, you don't want to eat? That's all right. I'm right here. I just held her and then took her to her vet, and then we got her to cross over. But that was with assistance, which is something else in our society, which really, with that dying with dignity, still we can't have the assistance that we can give our pets.
We can. In California, we can. In Oregon, we can. And I think there's like another 10 states across the country.
Really?
Yeah.
I think Michigan was one of the first that opened it up because of the Dr. Kevorkian stuff. I think they opened up first after all that.
Yeah. And Oregon, you don't even, if I'm dying in Florida and I can't get that in Florida, you can't get that in Florida right now. You can fly or travel to Oregon and you don't have to become a resident to get the medicine that you need. Oh
my girl, I just got goosebumps over my whole body, because that is part of that dying with dignity. I mean, it's assisted, and it's to me, it's an easier crossing than the struggle of like the body revolting and all of the things, like you said, like with food and the body revolting with food. And, it just helps that to be smoother is what it feels like.
Yeah. Assisted dying. Sorry. It's very personal, and it's one that I back up. And we don't know how we can sit here as healthy non-dying people from the outside and say, this is what I would do, or I would never do that. But all of that is kind of a bumper.
You don't know till you're there.
So you're there. Right. Exactly. And then
I would choose it.
Yeah. I would,
If it came down to it and it was terminal like that, and it was like, okay, you know what? I've done my fight. Like, let's do this with dignity.
Absolutely. This is Pam. She said she had COPD and her cancer had metastasized. She was in and out of the hospital. She decided she did not want to go back to the hospital. Hospice told my niece and her, so no food. She was in Ohio. I saw her the week before she died.
Oh, so hospice said don't give her food. Yeah, so that was I would love to offer that to you, Pam. I know that you know that there I could hear like the energy behind what you wrote in that comment of, you know, they stopped feeding her and it was awful. That might be a really good indicator of a place that you can kind of soften up a little bit, because I if hospice was recommending that, they were giving her a way to, it's like refusing food or not eating food is crawling in a dark room and trying to figure out which way's my way out of this body.
Exactly.
And so the rejection of food or not eating food helps speed up that process, and that might have been a really great thing for her, as opposed to what it looks like for us on the outside is like, oh my God, you're starving to death. Like, it's a different perspective.
Oh, and from a spirit perspective, because I know I eat to ground myself, because my spirit, I swear, I pop out of my body. You know, ever since I've had my near death, sometimes my grounding is a problem. And it's like, I feel like I'm like popped out of my body, like I'm not all in my vessel. And so food helps with grounding. So if you think about it from a spiritual perspective, not having that food would allow that spirit to cross over easier.
Well, yeah, and also at the end of life, your body can't digest food either.
Right.
It's not digestible.
It just sits there.
Yeah, your body's, you know, in the shutting down process. It's
a very sophisticated process,
right,
that the body knows exactly what to do and how to do it. She basically,
right. It's like it's going through a process of shutting down certain systems in an order so it shuts down properly.
Mm-hmm.
If she had fallen asleep and not woken up, if she had kept eating, that makes sense that hospice would do that, because she was like in a self-induced coma in a way. Her body was shutting down, sleeping to help to transition.
But I also want to say too, it's really difficult to watch our loved ones like that, and I'm really sorry you had to kind of witness that part, Pam.
That's where someone like Mary would come in.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you had to go through that.
So hard.
One person throwing up. Yes, yeah. That's the hard part, right? That's
because the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering, was she choosing not to eat as well, or was it just denied? See, that's another thing I'm wondering.
Yeah. Yes, but how should I watch a person throwing the body around from not getting food? So was she asking for food? Okay.
That's what I'm wondering. Yes, going to sleep and just dying, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and that's where with assisted, they help give you medications that help to calm down that body and the mind as well through that assistance. And that's where in states that don't offer assistance, we don't get that the same.
No.
Well, I remember when Clarissa had to go in and do the stuff with hospice with her dad, when they moved him out of ICU to the hospice care aspect of the hospital, they moved him to a different room. They actually gave him medications to help bring the body's adrenaline down and all that, because all the adrenaline that was in his system, everything his body was releasing from all the medications they was giving him were keeping his body alive and going. And so they started giving medications that would counter what they had given to let the body come back to its normal shutdown process state.
Okay, because they were keeping him alive, basically.
Yeah, until the family pulled care, they were doing everything to keep him alive.
Pam said she was not choosing not to eat. They had her medicated. Pam said she'll be right back. I'm
Okay.
interested kind of in that, because that is something that you got to think about, especially with yourself or with loved ones, or, I mean, that's a
I
big
would rather
thing.
be medicated than eating at that stage of end of life.
I think I would too.
But it's a personal thing, and I think with what Pam went through and just the loss of a sister, but also it is very complicated grief when you witness the human body and how it breaks down at end of life, and every death is different. Sometimes people go to sleep and they don't wake up, and then sometimes it is a fight for them to release themselves from the body, and it's difficult, and those, it's hard to watch that, and my heart goes out to you, Pam. I can see and feel the dysregulation of that, and the confusion of that, and the anger that must be associated with all of that, and
underneath that is grief.
Yeah, it's grief.
Well, and what about people who are in hospice who don't have family support, who don't have anyone advocating for them? Like, as a death doula, you could go hold their hand.
Yeah, there's a beautiful program called NODA, No One Dies Alone.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, NODA. They have an influx of volunteers, which makes me really happy. So sometimes you can't even get into their program, which is wonderful news. That when in the program where a adult wants to die alone, people are flooding to make sure of that. So it's kind of cool. But check in your area and see it's nationwide. And so there's programs like that, and at the end of life, there's some really great hospice care workers who kind of step in as being that space holder, and that's why end of life doula work is so important, so we can fill in those gaps a little bit more as well, just to give people the highest quality of death that they could possibly have with where they're at, wherever that is.
I got goosebumps right there with you. I volunteered animal shelters with Reiki to help some of their trauma patients, and it's so beneficial, with animals alone, and just thinking like of how many do pass away without having someone there with them, and the idea that there's a program, No One Dies Alone, that my heart just like opened up, and I like had tears in my eyes to even hear there's something like that.
It's beautiful. As crazy as the system is, and as dark as the different corners of end of life care can take us, and there's actually some really beautiful things happening, and there is this death positive movement that is taking place where we are really wanting to hold death and be with it differently, and there's powerful souls coming through with that desire to change just kind of how things look. So
don't shut us in a corner. Hold our hand and help us.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, you were so wonderful. Josh, thank you for bringing her on and for having me. I'm like all choked up.
I'm glad to have you both here. We can keep going. We've been going about an hour and 37. We've been going about a minute. Yeah. And Mary's from California. She knows what I mean.
I do need to hop off here at 7:00.
Okay.
That's in 10 minutes. So is that good for everybody?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start wrapping things up. That way you're not pressed for time and a rush.
Is there anybody else's comment that because I can't see them? Is there anybody else?
I think we got most every comment covered.
Yes, we did. Awesome. Pam is back. Pam, did you have anything else? Runes and Ravens? Anything else? Anybody?
Runes and Ravens had to go. The kiddos needed her, so she had to drop out and go do mama stuff.
Mama Raven.
Yeah.
This conversation is something that needs to be had a lot more. And so many people fear death so much and see it as such an ugly, bad thing, that having this conversation of that death positivity, I wrote that down. It is something that we need to be having more in spiritual communities and addressing this, because it is such a huge deal.
Well, we're all going to do it.
We're all going to die.
Yeah. And I think it is a huge deal. And I'm willing to open up this platform anytime you want to come on and have conversations, Mary. You're open to whenever you want to. If you want to join us next week for that conversation with Runes and Ravens on religious trauma, I'll send you the information. It's on. That's next Thursday, I believe, at the same time.
I may be able to do it. I may be in my car again, I think. So
Okay, I will hit you up. I will.
Myself on breaking reality.
I love it.
We'll get you a little breaking reality, little banner.
We do have a question. This one's a good one. Clarissa said, how do I deal with my father's death without feeling like I failed him? It's almost like survivor type of grief right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that also needs to kind of be expanded on a little bit of where you feel you failed.
Yeah, and that might be a conversation that needs a little more than 10 minutes too.
Absolutely. Hey, Susan, I love you.
I'm happy to see how she responds to that, because this might be one of those things that kind of pop, or if for some reason, if we need more time. But I would love to know that fear of failure. And I also want to know if that is tied into the relationship you've always had with your dad. And that can look like always wanting to make dad proud.
Being daddy's girl.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of expand on that, because by no means is your father in this beautiful place that he's in right now being like, well, she failed me. I know that is not the essence in which sits good in your inner being of knowing.
Right. So
yeah, there's no way he's on the other side, sweetie, thinking that you let him down. So explore that reasoning behind why you feel like you failed him, just like what Mary suggested. Like, what is underneath that feeling?
Yeah.
Why do you feel you failed him?
Yeah. And maybe there's a fear of failure in other parts of your life. And this might be where, so when I say death is my life coach, I mean it quite literally, like, where are the things in other people's deaths and me facing my own immortality? Like, what is it trying to teach me? And maybe through your death and this thing that's left over, this crumb, this clue, this little hint back to you might be like, maybe failure can be your superpower. Maybe you shouldn't be afraid of failing others or failing yourself or failing anything. Maybe that is something that your father on the other side wants to actually take away from your human experience.
Death is a mirror.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at that and then reflecting back on yourself. Okay, what is that teaching me? What is that telling me? What do I need to incorporate in my life?
Yeah.
Because of that message.
Yeah. Yeah. So this might be the greatest question and the greatest gift you could have ever received from this part of your grief.
Oh, Pam. I love Pam. She's like our group mother.
Maybe look at what could be done. Yes.
He would be proud of you for.
Yeah. Instead of what, the failure aspect, what would he be proud of you for, Clarissa?
And I've told her this before. Look at the things that he talked to her about that he wanted to see her accomplish in life, and work on accomplishing those things. Some of them were very small things. I don't want to say small and insignificant, but small in the grand scale of things, in the grand scheme of things. They're smaller things that are more manageable, more goals that can be grasped within, a time frame to work something to work forward and to. And those are the things that I've told her to go for and to make those accomplishments things that she would do that she knows he would be proud of her for.
Exactly. Like Susan said, in that shadow self, like looking at your shadow self, looking at that aspect of yourself that can help you. And Pam agrees, small steps.
Yep.
I'm still wondering though, why she, it's almost like a responsibility thing, like feeling like you're responsible for someone's life, and then we project that onto them.
Yeah, and then things can get really complicated at the end of life. And I also compare it to like women who give birth, you know, for we'll just give the example of the woman who wants to do the home birth with the doula with certain music and certain lighting, and all of a sudden now complication, and it's going to be in her best interest to switch up the plans and move to the hospital and be in a different setting. And sometimes people have a death plan as well, and they want certain aspects to be done, but the circumstances won't lend to that. And sometimes people also feel, I failed, I didn't give them a good death, I told them, you know, the hospital, I you know, don't do this, and they did that because they had, whatever it is. Also that could be complicated too, and leave a feeling of failure. So that's why I kind of want to know more that feeling that she's expressing, and where that comes in as well. Yeah.
Clarissa, are you still here with us? I don't know. She was still watching a second ago, I think.
Yes, but we are getting very close to the time that Mary's got to go. So
maybe Clarissa can reach out, Josh. That sounds like it's something important.
I can put Mary and Clarissa in contact with each other.
Good.
Yeah. Happy.
I feel it's important.
I agree.
All right. Let's go ahead and wrap things up at that point. Because Mary's got to get going. We don't want to hold her up. Thank you so much for being here with us, Mary. Thank you for this great conversation. Thank you for being here, Tiffany. Thank you everyone for coming out. We've had an amazing time tonight. If you want to get a hold of Mary, I will make sure that they are links in the description, as well as links for Tiffany and myself in the description if you want to get a hold of anyone. If you're interested in Mary, any of her work, working with a death doula, or interested in the training that she offers and becoming a death doula,
I'm interested.
Please feel free to reach out to her. Okay. Thank you so much again for being here, Mary. It's been a pleasure.
I love you guys. Thank you, Tiff. It was such a pleasure to meet you, and
pleasure.
Magical goddess that you are. Josh he always speaks so highly of everybody, and he's always right. Thank you, Joshua, for opening this space and creating Breaking Reality. Still one of the most badass names.
Thank you.
All these kinds of conversations, and I truly respect you and your work and the energy that you are sharing with the collective. Thank you for creating this space for me here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Everybody, we will see you guys later next Thursday at 8 p.m. Runes and Ravens is going to be here. Mary is going to try to join us on that night. Tiffany will be here with us, and we are going to be discussing surviving religious trauma. It is going to be a doozy of a show.
Oh yeah,
that's potent.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a hard hitting show. So yeah.
Awesome.
So until next week, we will see you all later. Have a good night. Be blessed, and goodbye.
Good night, everybody.